Hey everyone, it's Ian Heller, and welcome to the Technology Leader Panel, using technology to drive profits and productivity. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mike Beware, who's the CEO of Cavallo, and Dan Kamenstein, who's a senior product manager with Epicor. Hey guys, how are you today?
Doing well, Ian. Thank you. How are
Doing
you?
great, Ian. Thanks for having us.
Good. Well, we're really looking forward to this discussion. So we got a good crowd joining us. Before I get you guys involved, let me just talk about a couple of things we have upcoming at Distribution Strategy Group. First, we have the Profit and Productivity Summit this November. It's at the Marriott Chicago. You're not going to want to miss this. We've got some great speakers and sponsors. We're going to be talking about how you improve profitability in a distribution company through a variety of means. Some of that is margin management, some of that is driving superior productivity. Alex Chalsofsky, who's an economist with the Bundy Group, is going to be joining us. Phenomenal speaker. John Weborg, who's the CEO at Stellar Industrial, is going to be there. We got a bunch more speakers that we're going to be announcing soon. If you know anything about our conferences, they get very high marks for added value. You'll come away learning how to run your company more profitably and with greater productivity. You really don't want to miss it. And the networking is just fantastic. I mean, you really meet people who are progressive and thoughtful in how they run a distribution firm. We have our whole lineup of our own software products. We have the distributor software suite, Customer Experience RX. This is a customer engagement or net promoter score software system that's designed specifically for distributors. It works really well. It's low cost, easy to administer, gives you answers you're not going to get from a generic system. Employee Experience RX, this is how you measure employee engagement. And Demand RX helps you understand the demand by product line, by customer for a prospect or customer. It's really a phenomenal piece of software to help you direct your sales force and your marketing efforts into where the opportunities are with individual customers. Okay, enough of the commercials. Let's get to the real deal. So we got Mike Beware and Dan Kamenstein again. So guys, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I'm going to stop sharing the slides so everybody can see us more clearly. Mike, since you're first on the slide, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit
Great.
about, what you do, what Cavallo does, and a little bit about your career.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. First of all, I can attest to the great conferences you guys put on. I was just at your AI conference last month, and it was phenomenal. So
Thank you.
I recommend everybody attend. My name is Mike Beware, CEO of Cavallo. I think this session today is a perfect fit for why we even exist as a company, Ian and everyone else watching. We were founded by a distributor about 20 years ago, and this was an individual who grew his business to a certain point, realized he needed to invest in real technology. And in that case, it was an ERP system. But he knew at the time it wouldn't fulfill all of the things he wanted to do. So he literally built technology to do the things that he saw in his vision. And it's really, he was obsessed with, how do I 10x my profit margins and work half time? And he literally achieved that. He actually achieved that by building technology. So that's kind of what we're about. And the focus for us, and you've got a couple of panelists here with Dan, very broad view from an ERP perspective, where we're a more narrow view. Our real focus is the profit levers inside of every single order and all of the data that's left behind by the orders over the time and how you harness and use that data. For me personally, I've spent most of my career I spent a lot of my time in automotive early in my career, supply chain, a lot of ERP. I found my real love was sort of this intersection of big industry problems where there was a lot of data that was under leveraged. And that's my sweet spot. So that's what I'm excited about to talk about today as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data. I mean, distributors have a ton of data, and learning how to leverage it properly to drive improvement it's difficult, but the data is there, and you can do it if you're rigorous.
Yeah, that's right.
Dan, tell us a little bit about, I mean, I think people know Epicor is one of the leading ERPs for distributors. Tell us a little bit about your career and what you're doing at Epicor.
Sure. Thanks, Ian, and thanks again for having us today. So my name is Dan Kamenstein. I'm Senior Principal Product Manager. I am responsible for the Profit 21 product at Epicor, one of our two leading products in the distribution space. I've been with Epicor for 38 years, all working with Profit 21. So I started with Profit 21, the company, before a series of mergers, acquisitions, and whatnot led us to be a part of Epicor. So I'm responsible for the roadmap and the vision. I have done pretty much everything in this that Epicor can do, from QA development. I did spend some time in sales. I've spent a dozen years as the product manager for Profit 21. So that's really been my sweet spot, has been analysis and design and working with our customers to design solutions that help them get the most out of their ERP investment.
So 38 years, are you thinking about making a career out of it?
Yeah, it's come to mind a couple of times, you know.
Well, good for you. That's fantastic. So to the crowd, to the audience, please use the Q&A button if you have questions, and we'll roll them into the discussion. Don't be shy. A lot of times we get all the questions at the end, and I can't get to them all. So if you've got one, please jump in early. So Dan, let me start with you. There's so much going on in technology these days. Where do you think distributors are seeing the greatest ROI from their technology investments?
Yeah, for sure. I think anything that drives efficiency and automation is really where it's at right now. You know, features and functionality that allow employees to get more done in less time. You know, get your day job done, get it done in less time. Move on to strategic things. You know, anything that we can do to automate the repetitive, ongoing things that you do every day, and then let you do the one-off or let you do the customer relationship that really can't be automated. That improves that loyalty and stickiness. And this could be whether it's streamlining order entry or a cash application process, warehouse automation, EDI, e-commerce, any of those things that take hands off the keyboards. That's really where the ROI is at right now that we're seeing.
Okay, Mike, and related question then, what do you think is the biggest misconception distributors have about using technology to improve profitability or productivity?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. If you don't mind, I'll just add a couple things to
Oh,
what,
yeah, of
what
course.
Dan was saying. So one thing I've observed, and I think your audience attending today is probably more tech forward than what we typically see. I can't tell you the number of times I see people looking at investments and not thinking about the business outcomes they're trying to achieve. It happens in boardrooms, et cetera. And so when I think about even our business, my job is to drive enterprise value. And I think any business owner, the goal is to drive enterprise value. And well, what's the way to do that in distribution? It's to maximize profits. Right. So when we're looking at investments, we're trying to help people understand, make investments that are actually going to drive profit maximization, which will drive enterprise value. Now, sometimes they don't seem to care. Like, we have to figure out a way to make them care about that. A lot of times they're focused on top line. And so I think that's really critical, is to sort of look through every investment through the lens of what's this going to do to an enterprise value. So in terms of misconceptions, I see a couple of things. I'm not sure they're misconceptions, but one of them is, they think they're going to turn the technology on, flip the button up, and everything's going to work great. And there's almost always some change management perspective that you have to go through. You've got to sort of plan for the change. You've got to make sure that the team is ready, that they're trained. We oftentimes will see this progression, which I actually like to see, which is there's initially resistance to the thing, followed by the people are starting to get into it and they're starting to really get value out of it. There starts to become a murmuring that happens in the organization. Others get curious. Oh, I want to use that too. And then they get to the third stage, which is they're fighting over the technology. Yeah. But you have to get people ready to adopt the change. And I think the other thing that I see a lot of is a lack of focus on quality data. Whether it's AI or any system that's depending on data, you need high quality data. You need to make that a priority. There was a time not too long ago, we took a prospect through our application, and you could tell that the CEO was enthralled with what was possible. And at the end of it, though, he said, our data is such a mess, we wouldn't be able to use this. And the answer I would have preferred would have been, I have to fix my data so I can use this. And so, we're actually spinning up a sort of data quality discipline as a practice, so we can help customers sort of fix that. Because as you said it, a lot of these companies are sitting on 1 billion data points, literally. And it's a gold mine if harnessed, but it's a completely wasted resource if not.
Yeah, I think to go right along with that, Mike, the data for sure. And we see so much M&A activity in the distribution space right now. So data coming together from multiple organizations, you get duplicates, You get data that you're not sure if it's a duplicate. You're trying to merge it and all. And we're working on tools to try to help with that as well. I think the other thing too is the ones we see are really successful treat their ERP as a strategic tool and not just a means to an end in the business. And like you said, people fighting over the technology, getting past that change, and realizing how it can really drive not just the top line but the bottom line of the business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, just sort of off-topic question. What percentage of the time, what percentage of a ERP's capability does the average distributor really use, do you think?
We usually guesstimate that it's about 30%.
Okay.
The really successful ones, will be 50, 60, 70%. Nobody uses all of it, certainly. But
Right.
our history says that most customers tend to use only about 30% of the capabilities that are available to them out of the box.
Interesting. And both of you guys earlier mentioned automation. And so you can think about automation as automation for efficiency or automation for insight.
Mhm.
How do you think about those two? Mike, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think when I hear the words automation for efficiency, I think about taking a certain thing that's known, maybe known inputs, known desired outputs, and making that faster, making that less expensive. But it's something that's sort of known up front. The definition of the thing is known up front, where I think automation for insight is certainly a level up. And it could be things like where the system could be machine learning. It's actually studying and learning what's happening at a customer level, end customer level. It's predicting which customer may churn, for example. And it's actually maybe automating an action to do something about it. It could be an email communication to the sales leader. It also could be an offer to that customer that's presumably likely to churn. So I think the automation for insight is actually a system that's learning things. It's learning new things and helping you act on those things. I might even prefer automation for action.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Automation for insight, I think of it as technology providing critical information at the time it's needed, without the user having to go off and find it. Having that information surface to the user at the time they're looking for it, sometimes without them even realizing that they need to be looking for it. We have some examples of that. Automation for efficiency, I think that was a really good definition, but let's make it easier for someone to get their daily tasks done. Remove keystrokes, remove steps from the process. What can the machine take care of that can get you from point A to point B faster? So I can get on to other things that are more strategic that maybe I can't quite automate as much.
So that leads me to another question then, Dan. I mean, you work across verticals. Mike, I know you do too. So you may have some views on this as well. But starting with Dan, what do you see as the most common friction points in tech adoption? And how can companies overcome them? I mean, you mentioned data. So or Mike mentioned an example of a company who thought their data isn't ready. And by the way, we work with a lot of distributors. We have yet to find one that says our data is in great shape. They all think their data is horrible, right?
Right.
So if that's the barrier, you're just never going to do it, right? But Dan, what do you see as the other friction points to adoption?
Right. And Mike, you mentioned this before, resistance to change. Many distributors have not changed their system in decades. It's a big process to go through an ERP system implementation. No one is really saying like, hey, my goal for the year is to implement a new ERP system. That's not the first thing on people's list. Even the best and most successful implementations are typically long and pretty arduous. But the ones that are most successful are, where you get a core team who's heavily invested, bought into the benefits, and it's presented as making lives people better. And it's not just a task, and it's not an IT task to implement a new ERP. You also have to deal with the generational issue a lot in distribution. The distributors, a lot of them are family-run businesses. They're multi-generational. A lot of them are looking for ERPs because they're making that generational shift from one generation to the next. But there's a lot of long tenured staff. They know their jobs very well. They know the system they've been on very well. They're, I don't want to say necessarily afraid of technology, but maybe afraid of new technology. We see it, with AI. There's great potential around AI if it's deployed strategically. But a lot of users are afraid of it for a lot of reasons. They're just afraid of the concept of AI, or they're afraid of, it's going to come and take my job away.
Sure.
So you need to be careful about AI being presented in a way that it's going to make your job easier to do. It's going to allow you to get onto other things, but it's not intended to take your job away. And that's really how we're focusing on our AI deployments, or things that are complementary and not things that are going to replace. The machines are not going to come and take people's jobs away.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a long history of technology being used for automation to, if not reduce headcount, to hold it flatter over time. So I think that's going to be an ongoing, you know, uh, uh, battle or struggle for distributors to get that right. I mean, you want to adopt technology, but your people make up your culture, right? And so anyway, but hey, Mike, I know Cavallo really focuses, among other things, on order management and operational visibility. How does improving these areas yield to better margins?
Yeah, I'll get to that. I just wanted to highlight the AI thing just for a moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's such a fascinating topic. I'm sure we'll talk about it more today. When people are looking at investments, like even at your conference, I think one of the things people were looking for was, how do I leverage AI?
Mm.
Whether it's my owners pushing me, the board is pushing me, I need to figure out how to leverage AI. And I would ask people to always go back to the basics. What is the point?
Yeah.
We should leverage AI to do things better, right? And I also agree with the point about AI and technology is not designed to replace people. We have a lot of customers that like to brag at the fact that they were able to grow 50, 60, 70% without having to add headcount.
Right.
So they don't brag about reducing headcount. They actually brag about growing without having to add.
Yep.
And I think we have to be careful to tell people, don't worry about your job. I think you better be staying aware of what's happening with the technology right now. And I think even more than ever before, as a distributor, the ability to compete, like the best distributors are using technology to compete, right? If they don't have a strategic advantage, they might have a strategic advantage plus technology advantage. AI is the best advantage we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Now you have to use it properly. It can also do things poorly. There's many things it can do poorly. But my advice to people is definitely don't put your head in the sand. Get ahead of it. Know what's possible. Now with Cavallo, again, we're very focused on order level profitability. And we think we're kind of unique in that way. There are many levers inside of every single individual order. And what we try to do is figure out, how do we help make sure that, for example, we don't set the price. We're not setting prices. We have technology in one of our applications that does that. But there's pricing execution, there's pricing enforcement, there's pricing maximization. Like, imagine a world in the future where you literally know at an individual price level for each individual customer. That's possible, right? We're just getting closer to it. And so we see a lot of companies with a lot of what I'll say leaky buckets in the orders. And when I get people to start thinking about this, for every 100 orders, they might have 35, 40 orders that have some form of a profit defect in them.
Right.
What's a defect? It's a price that's fluctuating more than you want it to.
Right.
Or it's cost increases that aren't being offset with price increases. I was talking to a prospect about a month ago, and I showed them literally, I'm not going to give the exact number, but thousands of transactions where cost was up substantially for a given SKU.
Yeah.
And price was held constant. They had no idea.
Yep.
And I see the opposite thing happening a lot as well. And the other part, I think, is we think it's the best practice. I think you would agree that you should know to the penny where you're making money and losing money and why. Like, actually,
yeah.
Any BI tool can tell you like which customer's buying more or less, or which items you're selling more or less. But the next level is, do you know why? Do you know the root cause, the causal factors? That's a different level of math and data science. That's kind of how we think about it, though, is order level sort of mastery.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. It's interesting how many distributors really don't know their profits, which customers are profitable, which product lines are profitable, which locations are profitable. And you do the standard sales and gross margin and cost measurements, but they're not really cost measurements. They're just allocations from the P&L. You don't really know where you're making money and where you're not.
Right.
Hey, Dan, so we have a question from Deborah, who wants to know, what methods do distributors use to learn about new technology other than, of course, distribution strategy group events? She qualifies very, very nicely.
Yes,
So,
well, yes.
so, in your 38 years, how do you learn about new technology, and how do you think your distributors should best go about learning about technology?
Right. So, obviously, there's any number of great sources to read about stuff on the internet, and find places. Work with your, from a distributor standpoint, work with your ERP provider. We like to think we're experts on technology. We're out there researching. We work with folks like yourself, Ian, to make sure that we're caught up on things, and we learn from other distributors too. Our distributors are a great networking group amongst themselves. And there's a lot who like to share what they're doing, and we learn what people are doing or what they want to do, and it just leads to those discussions that helps us develop new things as well. And then we find companies, like a Cavallo and other companies out there who are doing really interesting things with technology. So there's any number of choices, with between organizations, and read the now electronic trade magazines that are out there. We don't have the physical copies in front of us anymore, but there's just a lot of great ways that I find to look about it. I'm reading stuff or listening to podcasts all the time now, more than I did when the stuff was on paper, for sure, because it's just so easy to get to and consume that information these days.
And Mike, so Dan, you mentioned user conference, and Mike, I know I'm coming to yours next month. Is there a correlation between people who attend your user conference and the retention of those customers over time? I mean, I guess it's hard to know which drives which, right? But
Yeah.
I would imagine if you come to a user conference from your major software providers and you get to know the other people there, you're going to learn ways of using that software that you're just not going to learn as quickly or as compellingly through other methods. Is that right?
It's 100% true. Yeah, it's remarkable. Actually, the last one we had, I was sitting there next to two people that had been using our software for 10 years, and they were listening to tips and tricks from one of our employees, and they were furiously taking notes, like learning things that they didn't know. And I was like, this is crazy to me that they were still learning. But you see a lot of that happening with the customers talking to each other. The other thing I love about the conferences is when we have a prospect attend and they get to talk to our customers. It's one thing to hear how great we are from us, but when they can get that feedback directly from other customers using the software. But you're right, there's definitely a correlation between those people attending and retention over time.
Dan, same thing?
Yeah, same thing. We have our big global conference, and it crosses all of our platforms. So we're, of course, not just in distribution. So we have manufacturers and distributors and all at our big user conference, and the customers can network with each other even across the platforms. And we even use that opportunity. We learn stuff from the other side of our business at that event too. But we can't measure the impact that has on customers, the ability to network. And Mike, like you just said too, prospects. We have prospects there, and they really get a feel for the company and what we're about, and talk to other customers and understand it. And the networking is invaluable, and the tips and tricks sessions, by all means, are the most popular sessions and the ones that get a lot of the best customer feedback. And that paid for my price of admission to the conference was stuff I learned just from that session. Because we said they only use 30% of the system they have. We can come in there and sometimes teach them something that's in that other 70% they're not using, and suddenly they can take advantage of it. And it can be very dynamic for them.
Got it. And let's see, some questions are piling up here. When is the Cavallo conference, Mike?
It's August 18 to 20.
Okay, got it. In Grand Rapids.
In Grand Rapids. Yeah.
Got
I
it.
actually I was with 3 West Coast people at our conference last time, and I said to them, hey, would you guys prefer if we move the conference somewhere more central to you, like perhaps Vegas? And they all said, no, keep it in Grand Rapids. We love coming to Grand Rapids. I was, okay.
No kidding.
Easier for us.
It's a cool town, especially if you spend a couple extra days and hit the west coast of Michigan.
Yeah.
And let's see here. So Dan, a couple of thoughts here. How can ERP systems evolve to become more proactive tools versus reactive data repositories? Or maybe you guys are already on that path.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we are definitely down that path. And this is where really having strong analytics, a BI tool, and AI can come into play. Being able to display key and relevant KPIs with the user without having to go look for that information, which is something you can do within our application, whether that's built from our BI tool or whether that's built from just data that's within the application that's unique to their ability. But user logs in and sees stuff relevant to them right at eye level. Or within a transaction is able to see information like that right at eye level. And then proactive capabilities, things that we're looking at being able to do. We've rolled out an AI-based item recommender tool. So like your favorite commerce site that you might buy from on a regular
Sure.
basis that says people who bought this also bought these. It's doing a similar thing, but they're very unique to an individual customer's product mix and what they're selling and what gets sold together. And it doesn't just give the obvious stuff like selling batteries with a flashlight. It might discover a lot of
Right.
people who buy flashlights, and batteries, they might be planning to go camping. Maybe you need to buy a tent or a sleeping bag or something like that. Stuff that a CSR might not immediately realize. Or proactive, like, oh, this customer might be due to buy this item that they bought from you before, but they haven't bought it from a while, even though they've regularly bought it in the past. So, notify the CSR like, hey, they're overdue to buy this.
Yeah.
And be able to have that conversation without the CSR trying to look up and figure out if that such a thing like that is happening.
And those are really steps towards becoming more agentic, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Good. Okay, Mike, let's see here. In your experience, since you do a lot of this, a lot around KPIs, et cetera, what are the KPIs or operational benchmarks distributors should be tracking that you think they often overlook?
Might bore you a little with this answer. I always come back to the absolute core. So
Okay.
I might even say our mutual friend, Al Bates. I think the way he
Yep.
thinks about things is pretty spot on, right? So
Yep.
pre-tax profit, return on total assets. These are things that I think people should know and be making investments to try to improve. Aside from that, whether you call them order economics or profit levers, things like lines per order, average order value. I think fewer is better, less is more, so to speak. I think about that the same way I do my own business here. Like my big goal is not profit, but growth. Sort of rule of 40 revenue growth, recurring revenue growth. And I push everything through that lens. It's the same thing here is how can you minimize the number of metrics, but are you focused on the right ones? Right? And is every metric that you're looking at, how does it contribute to the bigger, more important metric?
Yeah, I think you could drown in it, right?
You totally could.
And then you
Sure.
wind up sort of maximizing the compromises because you're trying to hit everything at the same time.
That's right.
Right. And Dan, when people are looking at the ROI of a tech investment, particularly if the results are indirect, like with an ERP, there's so many aspects to an ERP. It's got to be hard to to estimate accurate ROI of an ERP investment. Is that true? I mean, how do people go about that?
That is, it's hard to measure those indirect or non-tangible things.
Right.
So you want to look at, maybe broadening the definition of ROI. Traditional ROI is just direct financial returns. But when you're investing in tech, especially involving software and all, there's so many intangible things: time savings, improved decision making, enhanced customer experience, enhanced customer loyalty, even employee satisfaction. If you're deploying a new ERP system, make sure you survey the employees, understand, are they happy with it? Do they think this is improving their efficiency? Survey your customers. Is it easier to do business with us? We've deployed a new ERP system. You find that we're easier to do business with. Those sort of things, because those things will in turn turn around and lead to some of the more tangible things if you're easier to do business with. Look at other workforce and process efficiencies. Are you able to reduce overtime? Have you truly automated stuff and cut down on manual tasks? Can you onboard and train employees more quickly? because we know, these days it's hard to replace employees when they leave, and and new folks coming in, especially the millennials and Gen Z folks, they want to be up and running quickly. Do you have a good onboarding, platform? Is your platform able to onboard quickly so they can be productive quickly, and you're getting your return on investment out of those employees that you're hiring? So those are some of the things I think are a little less tangible, and how you want to look at measuring, the success of your technology.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, and I want to show you something. I drew this. I was at a multi-billion-dollar distributor. We put in a new ERP, and I probably didn't coin this expression, but it was new to me when I came up with it. And it was I called it the ERP trough of despair. Okay, so you have this old ERP. It's been optimized in your business for 10 or sometimes 20 years, right? And so you've wrung every bit of performance you possibly can out of this piece of software, right? And people have memorized the keystrokes and it's fine tuned to your business. Well, it comes time to put in a new ERP, and man, you're trying to survive the transition at first, right? So you have a lot of features turned off, you have a lot of functionality turned off. You need to get the thing in, get it to be processing orders, make sure it's tracking financials properly, which means when it first goes in, it's not as good as your old one. And that's just a natural part of the ERP. The difference is the old ERP was as good as it was ever going to be. The new ERP, when you first install it, it's as bad. It's the worst it's ever going to be. But the upside is tremendous. So you take a year or 18 months or whatever, and pretty soon you match the performance of your old ERP, and then you've got all this runway to improve into future years, right?
Absolutely. I think what you see, sorry, Mike, is people spend, you say that first 18 months, you're learning the system, you're trying to make sure you're getting, boxes out the door,
Right.
boxes in the door, and all. And then you have to think back and like, okay, why did I invest in this? What were the game-changing things and capabilities that I invested in this for? And
Right.
you start taking advantage of those. And that's when that big upslope hits, and you eclipse the old ERP quickly. And soon people forget, like, oh, remember that old system? Like, how did we live for so long on that old system? I can't believe that we were, it took us as long as it did to get us to this new way.
Yeah, and the problem though is sometimes in an effort to sell the employees on the new ERP, people don't aren't clear that some of those benefits are going to be deferred. It's actually going to be worse at first, and so people feel like betrayed almost. It's like, oh, I miss my old ERP, because they don't realize that you've got to go through this trough of despair to get to a level of performance that the old system never would have supported. And so the change management around any of these technology implementations includes being very clear and candid about the nature of the implementation and the timing of when the real benefits are going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For sure.
expectations management would solve many things professionally and personally, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And I think I really like that diagram, Ian. I'd like a copy of that. I probably could use it this afternoon.
I'll
One of
send
the
it.
keys is by doing those things properly, you can compress that time frame, right? From old
Correct.
to new.
Right.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you want to make your trough of despair as short as possible, but there's no way you're going to get by without one.
No. And in fact, what we're seeing with a lot of our customers is, if you're following Microsoft at all, they are working really hard to, end of life Great Plains, GP.
Yeah. Right.
And get everybody on Business Central. So they're sort of, in a way, trying to force people to go through that trough of despair.
Right.
And a lot of people aren't that excited about it. And as Dan, I'm sure, can attest, the more complex your business is, the harder it is to go to that new system.
For sure.
And Dan, you'll be pleased to know that when I was at Ian's conference a few weeks ago, Epicor was by far the number one ERP being used by all the people we talked to.
Yeah, it's one. I mean,
we love to hear that.
Yeah, it's on the short list of anybody who is interested in a new ERP for sure. Hey, Mike, I have a question from the audience. How is Cavallo approaching internal technology optimization right now, and is the AI top of mind internally as well?
Internally for us, I guess is the question. Absolutely, it is. We actually recently asked every single department head to deliver to us kind of how they're using it right now. And so we're trying to take an approach where we're letting them explore, as
Yeah.
opposed to, say, me or my executive team telling people how to use it. We're actually sort of letting it happen. We're also trying to monitor it too, to figure out, like, how are you best using it? And so it's getting a lot of steam in the engineering side. They're using it to write more code, be more efficient. We're using it in sales in different ways to streamline how we communicate, make things faster. I personally use it. I actually like to write, but I can do a lot more. I can do a lot more writing faster. I've got a 24/7 Copilot helping me write better, editing for me. But no, we're using it across the entire company. I want literally every department using it in some way for some improvement.
Yeah, and we're doing something similar, and we actually have an internal challenge going on right now that our CIO has put out there for teams to form internally to create a Copilot-based agent that will help their team or their function or perhaps the whole company do something more efficiently. And those are going to be submitted and reviewed by our executive team and some others, and the winner's going to get the winning team's going to get a nice reward. So really, trying to drive people to get more into learning and using Copilot, and not just asking it to compose an email for them or something like that, which has value too. But really try to get into the nitty gritty of what can be done with it.
So we didn't talk about this in the prep, guys, but it occurs to me that AI seems to be different in terms of how companies are getting this groundswell of learning. Their own employees are making suggestions about how to embrace it and adopt it more so than, say, e-commerce or other preceding technologies. Not that employees' own efforts and experiences weren't useful then, but with AI, it almost seems fundamental. It's like that contest that your CIO is having, Dan. I mean, I don't remember CIOs saying, "Hey, everybody, let's have a contest to see who can come up with the most exciting e-commerce website innovation for our company." I mean, it's probably out there, but it just seems more common with AI that there's this groundswell of or this bottoms up learning happening in companies.
For sure now. And we've done innovation days in the past, what we've called innovation days in the past, but it's really been around coming up with innovative ways to add things to our applications, come up with innovative new features and all. This is more about how can we make our internal business run better? How can we make people's jobs more efficient all internally, which will in turn, of course, help our customers. But yeah, leveraging, the power, we're actively encouraged to use Copilot as much as possible, to help us with our jobs now, which is something, any of the other technologies, you could use them, but they weren't as transformative potentially as what Copilot and AI could be. And it's something that we also want to encourage people to learn and understand how to use it and not be reticent or kind of afraid of using the AI. And so the more you use it and work with it, the more you realize and it'll teach you iteratively as well, how to use it better.
Hey, Mike, when you're looking at a technology initiative and working with a client or a prospect, who needs to be at the table? I mean, and I guess it's two parts to that question. Who needs to be at the table to do this proper selection of the technology? And then who needs to be at the table to make sure it's implemented properly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I got pouring rain. I'm going to turn my volume up just a hair. I think my answer is going to be different than Dan's a little bit because they take a broader perspective, probably have more people needed at the table. We typically want to speak with whoever's responsible for the P&L, who cares about profit, and then who's going to be using the software. So sales leadership, CFO, owner, operator, head of operations. My view on this is you want to identify anybody that's impacted by the technology at the table. And the more you can get, you kind of talked about expectations management a little bit ago. The more you can get people feeling like they're part of the design, they're defining the thing, they're designing it, they're part of the solution, you're going to have much higher engagement without a doubt. And so I think that's really important. There used to be a trick when I was a consultant many, many years ago. One of the tricks was actually to pick the sort of project adversary to lead change management. And the idea was to, sort of makes sense, right? Like why you want to do that. It's counterintuitive in a way, but we think it's important to get anybody that's going to be impacted by it, get them bought in and be part of the design.
Yeah, for sure. In our world, don't allow it to become an IT project, because it's vastly more than an IT project. IT is obviously heavily involved, even if it's going to be something that's moving to cloud. There's still IT components to it, but you need a strong executive sponsor. And don't forget about the back office folks. In distribution, a lot of it is transactional. Getting orders out the door, getting stuff shipped, getting stuff bought, making sure your inventory is right. But don't forget about those folks in finance and accounting. Sometimes they kind of come along later on. You need to make sure they're engaged as well. And I don't just mean like the CFO. I mean the people who are doing, the cash application process or cutting checks to vendors and all of that. Make sure they're engaged as well. Just to think, it's not just accounting. That's equally important as part of any system that you're going to implement.
Yeah, and one more thing I think to add on to Dan's point is if you can get people to fall in love with the problem that they're trying to solve for, I mean, that's the best level of engagement you can have.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about AI. And actually, I'm gonna ask both of you guys this question. So, Mike, we'll start with you. What are the most practical, or maybe I should also add compelling, applications of AI and machine learning in distribution right now?
I'll start with one. And I was observing this at your conference. I think Jonathan was moderating that last panel. And he asked the entire audience, how many of you feel like you have complete command of your customer churn? And I think 3 hands went up.
Yeah.
And it might have been 3 people whose bosses were sitting next to them and they felt like they had to raise their hand. I don't even know. But three hands went up. So a very, very practical example from our point of view is get ahead of customer churn. Use all of that data that you have. We have a model that's looking at 40 plus different buying behaviors across every individual customer. And it's assigning a risk score to every single customer that you're selling to. And so if you can get ahead of that and then automate some of those things, it can be game changing. There was one of our customers was asked by their board member, how many customers did you lose last year? And the first answer was, I don't know, I'll get back to you in a few days. And when they came back and said, well, we had a net gain of, let's say, 200. And it's like, no, the question was, how many did you lose?
Right.
And it was something like 400.
Yeah.
And we had a net gain of 600 and we lost 400 and we netted out at 200. Well, what's the cost of the 400 that you lost? How much profit left with those customers? What does it take from a customer acquisition cost to recover that? Right. That's a very practical example of how to leverage the data you have with AI to move a lot faster.
Yeah, actually, I ask 3 questions that are all related. Sometimes when I do presentations. One is, how many of you know exactly how many customers you gained and lost last year? Second question, how many of you have a plan or a target for how many you'll gain and lose this year? And 3, how many of you have someone who's specifically responsible for hitting those numbers? And by the time I get to that 3rd question, it's very common that only 1 or 2 people have their hands up.
Yeah.
Even in a room of 300 people. And it's fun. It's like, what could be more fundamental than keeping your customers? And yet we're just blind to it. We don't have metrics for it.
Yeah. So, I love those questions. And it's like, it's your data, right? As a distributor, this is your data. Let's put it to use.
Yeah, it also gives a mission for marketing, because a lot of times marketing is trying to find a way to be relevant and add value, and that's one way marketing can add value in a way that everybody cares about once they start thinking about it.
Right.
Hey, Dan. Okay, so this is probably a broader question for you, just because of the nature of what you do. But what do you see as the most practical applications of AI or machine learning in distribution today?
Yeah, so it's around. I mentioned the one before, which was a product recommender. The other thing that we're coming out with is an agentic LLM tool. Let users communicate with the application in natural language, the way they communicate with each other. It provides insights and information easily. It's at their fingertips. And in the case of our LLM tool, they can even interact with it with voice. So just like I'm talking to you, I could actually talk to our LLM tool and ask it to show me, the last orders from last week with the average order value and average number of lines per order, and it'll give me back that information. So that's, a really practical application. Those are going to continue to grow. And our goal is to get those to be transactional even. So I can start creating basic transactions from that, and do more technical things with it as well, while applying all of the application security and
Right.
everything to go along with it. You're really to just give users another means of interacting with the application and the ability to interact with the application kind of from everywhere and in whatever manner they feel is best.
And what about in areas like working capital management or warehouse management?
Yeah, so we, certainly, warehouse automation is a big thing, and we see that moving into robotics,
Hmm.
wearables, any kind, beyond just having a scanner gun that you walk around with. Give me something I can wear at my fingertips, so I can pick with both hands instead of having to hold the scanner gun in one hand,
Sure.
or a headset that I can wear and I can communicate with voice to the WMS application, or have robots that can move material around for me, or can even do some basic picking for me. That's all stuff that we see coming for sure.
Hey, Mike, I know Cavallo talks about empowering operations teams. And what does empowerment look like in the context of a technology implementation?
I think we hit it a little bit ago in terms of engaging the right people that are
Yeah, okay,
involved
fair,
and
right.
getting their buy-in early, getting them to own the problem. I think that's core.
And what about getting leadership teams to support frontline employees in using new systems? I mean, I'm sure there's something that you've experienced about getting the right level of training or peer support or connections to you guys so that frontline employees know where to go if they have questions and need more proficiency or they need training. I mean, what do you recommend to senior management teams so that the implementation is as successful and productive as early as possible?
Yeah, I think being highly aligned. Sometimes I think we're better at consulting about these things than we are ourselves internally.
Yeah, right.
But having tremendous alignment around what the goals are, incentives for achieving the goals, making sure that the leadership team is sort of walking the talk as well. They're all basic
Mhm.
things, but they're really, really important. You can't not focus on those things.
Yeah. Hey, Dan. And so if I think about customer expectations, I'm talking about the distributors' customers, right? So the people that distributors sell to. How are those expectations changing around speed? And we all have heard the examples or of lived the example of we order something from Amazon and it's there the same day, right? Um, and there's almost nothing you can't find online anymore. I mean, when I was running a Granger branch, we were where people came when they couldn't find stuff, and we were experts at
Yeah.
finding stuff, right? You call me, hey, I've got this old air compressor, it's got this ancient motor on it, and I would figure out what motor we could put on that air compressor to
Mhm.
make it work. Nobody needs that kind of help anymore, or very rarely, right? Now people just Google it or they go to LLMs or whatever, and so they go to distributors for a product, but they don't really go for tried for hard because stuff is hard to find anymore. And customers' expectations are continuing to change, right? And how is that driving changes around the expectations that distributors put on you? How is it describing? How is it changing what distributors have to do to add value to their customers? And what's your response to that at Epicor?
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a great question. There's a lot of things there. Certainly, speed of processing. Most distributors can't always match that Amazon model of delivering it the
Yeah,
same day, but but they can provide the model of I can have people available off hours for you to pick something up at a branch if you need to. I have product experts, so if I'm not sure, though I can find anything online, but if I'm not sure between two different types of adhesive or something, which one is the right one, my product experts can tell you that. Nobody at Amazon is really able to tell you that
sure.
level of information. We see distributors more and more getting into value add, whether they're doing, kitting, light manufacturing, fabrication, rental, field service, things like that. Value add. So they are expanding beyond traditional core pick it, pack it, ship it distribution as well. And that also goes to customer expectations. They kind of want a one-stop place where they can do all of those things. Meet me where I can be. Distributors still, even today in the world of e-commerce, can you come out to my site and do managed inventory for me? That's a huge value add on the distribution standpoint, when the distributor can put, whether it's vending machines or just crib management at a customer site, or consigned inventory, some of those things that you can't replicate that online, and it can really help. And it improves that customer loyalty and stickiness for our distributors with the customers as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's the number one reason that customers fire their vendors or suppliers is because that supplier or vendor didn't care about their business. There's a human element there, right? I think Dan's point is spot on.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's funny because it's not hard to tell when someone has a transactional relationship with you from their point of view, right? I mean, there has to be a certain sort of, hey, it's a labor of love to me to support you, and people can pick up very quickly when that's not the case. I mean, one of the reasons that account managers can go from one company to the next and take all the business with them is that doesn't have to be an economically rational decision. It just has to be, I really like that person and I trust them, and I sleep better at night with their support. So whoever they're selling for, I'm going to buy from that new company, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, hey, Mike, how are distributors using Cavallo to get ahead of service issues or delays before they happen? And that's part of what you're focusing on.
Yeah, we provide tremendous visibility into each order as it's flowing through the system. It might have 20 touch points from beginning to end. And we provide tremendous visibility. You can almost think of it like, I like to say Google Maps with traffic turned on, but for orders, not cars.
Right.
One of my smart friends said, you might prefer a train map over Google Maps. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good idea. But literally, we can tell you where orders are getting stuck. We can tell you where orders are getting held up. Sometimes orders get lost, right? We used to use this analogy where the order management system was sort of like a Plinko board. Things were bouncing all over the place. It was a black box. But we put the guardrails around the orders to make sure that they're flowing through the system properly and maximizing profit all the way through. Whether it's a back order item or not, it has to go through the same process when it comes back in. Is it meeting the profit targets? Are we shipping to a customer that owes us money? All those types of things. So we provide tremendous visibility on every order. It's not just about maximizing profit at the order level. It's about more orders over time, right? So higher throughput, faster velocity, those types of things.
Yeah, well, that's speaking your language now, Dan, right? I mean, you guys, you're talking about core productivity, right? And that's a combination of process and training and the right software.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whether it's managing throughput in the warehouse, and laying out the warehouse and material in the warehouse to maximize or minimize the amount of time people spend walking, and the amount of steps they take to find stuff in the warehouse, but also finding ways to anticipate supply chain delays. And we know with supply chain disruptions these days, whether it was from COVID a few years ago or now with tariffs or whatever else. How do you get ahead of those? How do you anticipate them? How do you have alternate sources of supply? And equally importantly, how do you notify customers if there is a delay? If there's a delay and there's nothing you can do about it, you want to make sure the customer finds out before they call you, hey, where's my stuff?
Sure.
You're way better off if you can say like, hey, we know you're expecting this stuff on Tuesday. Unfortunately, we've had a delay with our supplier. We're not going to have it in time. We're working to alternate source it. You get much more, a much better relationship with your customer if you're upfront and do that instead of waiting for them to come up and say, hey, what's going on with this? I was supposed to have it yesterday and I don't have it yet.
Get ahead of bad news.
Yes.
All right. And, any last comments? I'm going to wrap up here and talk about some of our future shows. So I'll ask everybody to hang on for that. We've got some very interesting stuff coming up. But Mike, anything you want to leave our crowd with before we move on?
No, it's been a great session. Again, look at your investments through the lens of profit maximization and enterprise value. I'm easy to find, just like Deion Sanders says there in Boulder, your town there. So happy to help anybody if we can. Thanks
Right.
for the time today. Enjoyed
You
it.
bet. You bet. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, similar thing, look at your ERP system as a strategic tool, find the analytics, look for analytic solutions that help you gain the most and gain the most efficiency out of it. Look to find ways to drive efficiency into the business. And likewise, Ian, thanks so much for the time today and the opportunity to be part of this. Mike, great to participate with you in this session as well.
Oh,
Yeah, great meeting you.
fantastic, you guys. Thanks so much. So, hey, we've got a webinar next week. This is a distribution leader panel. We actually had two more panelists join up right before this. I don't have their names in front of me, but it's going to be a very robust panel. So far, we've got Scott Wagner, who's the Director of Industry Transformation for the National Association of Electrical Distributors, and Erica Sherman, who's the president and owner of MC Tool and Safety Sales. This is on how distributors are solving supply chain challenges. Boy, is this timely, and with tariffs kind of going on and off, this is getting harder and harder to manage. And so we're going to have some people who are going to tell us how they are managing through these difficult supply chain times. That's brought to you by Infor. And then on July 24th, we have our regular show, AI News and Gurus, with our special guest. Well, hey, wait, what do you mean? I'm the special guest. I just saw that. Sorry, that made it sound like I was bragging, but I will be the special guest. That's hosted by Brian Hopkins, who works for Distribution Strategy Group, and Brooks Hamilton, who's the founder of AI Strategy Advisors. So anyway, thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks to our guests. I hope you enjoyed the content. I thought it was a great discussion. So keep selling, generate profits, be productive. We'll see you on the next Distribution Strategy Group event. Bye now.